Morning everyone, welcome to RiverData from ODI Leeds with Yorkshire Water. If you've used Zoom a lot, you'll know that it takes a while for everyone to join. So I'm going to fill. My name's Paul Connell from ODI Leeds. I'm the founder here. And I'm just going to keep talking so you know that your speakers are working as we join. We're just waiting for everyone to join us, and we're checking out everyone's backgrounds. You can tell the ODI Leeds and Yorkshire Water team, they've got the RiverData backgrounds up. And if you could just do as a if you've not found the RiverData hub page, we'll just put that in the chat now, so you can see everything that's happened before and what's been put online, and the description and how we're going to work. So if Grace, you could just drop here we are, the RiverData hub page is in the link there, so that you can use that and have a look at there's already some assets on there. There's a Google Sheet. There's a whole load of work that's been done previously. And imagine you've just come to an event and you're just grabbing some coffee. So this is that first 5 minutes. We're only 2 minutes in and everyone's here, so it's quite interesting the way that online events now work. And also video conferencing. Hardly anyone's late these days. I mean, if you're 2 minutes late, people start tapping their fingers and sending you text messages, don't they? So yeah, that's where we're at. So I think we are about. So I've got 2 pages of people who've joined today. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And start talking about RiverData. So hopefully you're on this web page here, so you can click to join the interactive conference on Zoom. The live stream is about to go live. I think if people click on there now, they can watch this. So if people haven't joined by Eventbrite, they can look at that. And the background is written up. I'm not going to read it out completely, but this is all about helping everyone, not just Yorkshire Water, not just the regulators, not just scientists or citizen scientists, but helping everyone to understand what data is available, particularly about the Wharfe. But you can imagine that this is going to be create a lot of patterns and design considerations and ways of working for Yorkshire Water, but other people who are publishing and sharing and using data relating to the rivers in this part of the world. But then also, there has been quite a lot of things in the news about pollution data, but also creating patterns and standards and ways of working for other parts of the country as well. So the way we're working at this is as if you've not been to an ODI Leeds session before, this is an innovation session. So the way we work is that we tend to try and get people involved. If you are here, you're probably very interested in the subject. You'll have something interesting to say. You'll have your own perspective. You will want to join in, and that's exactly what we want. So we've created a way of doing that online. Please forgive the technology if it doesn't quite work or it's not quite there. We have tried to think of everything, but as you always know, with these things, we will probably find the weak spot that we haven't quite predicted as we go through. But we think we've got a plan. And we need your help to do that. So please take the maximum of no tourists. None of the I'm just here to watch, or please join in, please contribute, please add to the work that we're doing. And what we've already done quite a lot of work already. So you can see the links here. So there's some open documents in Google and in Microsoft Word. Yorkshire Water are going to talk in a little bit more about the data that they've published already. And we have created something called a Miro board, if you've got that, and we're going to use that to steer the conversation. So what we've got in the morning is we've got Yorkshire Water going to tell us about the data they've published. We're going to show you how we're going to work together to get some output for everybody. and Giles from ODI Leeds is going to just take you through that in a second and ask you to do a couple of little warm-up exercises so that we can get people to use that. And we've already decided some subjects we want to talk about in the morning, and if people have the time and are able to join us for the afternoon, we'd like to open that up. The dream is that we might create the start of a RiverData standard for how people would publish, use and share data in the future, or we create an action and a group that might take this forward, both within and without Yorkshire Water, or within and without the Environment Agency, or just useful for everybody to use. So I'm going to stop there, but before we go on, are there any questions, or would anyone else like to make a point? If you just want to drop your comments in the Zoom chat, and I'll pick them up. I won't go to people because it might take forever, but if there's any points or anything anyone wants to raise before we start, I will stop sharing my screen and pick anything up in the chat. So Jeff's made a good point. Yeah, start on time. Yeah, that's what. So I'm just going to hand over to Giles Dring now from ODI Leeds, who's going to explain how the Miro board works, and he's got a little bit of a question for everyone to join in with, just so we give you a gentle start on this. So over to you, Giles.
Thanks, Paul. So hopefully everyone has seen the link to the Miro board that Grace or whoever dropped into the chat. If you just give people a chance to get in there. Well, I can see a bunch of people arriving now. I'll explain briefly as you're doing that what Miro's about. So effectively think of it like an infinite whiteboard that you can place comments and post-it notes and all sorts of things on there. And what we've done is set a few things out on there on that great big canvas, which help direct some of the discussion. I can see a bunch of you sort of joining now. We've got up to 28, 29, 30 people in there, so just a few more to get through. What I'll do, I have the ability to bring everybody to what I'm looking at. So I'm going to do that now. So you might suddenly find you zoomed somewhere else on the board. So I'm clicking bring everyone to me, and I can see that everyone's there. So I'm currently looking at the agenda for today. As Paul's explained, we've got this little section at the beginning where I'm going to go through the board, and then we'll go into a bit of a presentation from Claire and the people at Yorkshire Water. And towards the back end of the morning, we'll get into some interactive discussions. If you want, by the way, to follow me around, you can click on my icon at the top. So if you look at the very top of the board, you'll see there's some little circles with names in. Just be careful because there are two GDs. Grace is also GD, so so if you look. Okay, so a couple of things. So first of which is this is a frame on Miro. It's just an area of the board. If I zoom all the way out, you'll get to see the whole thing. So that's what we've set up. I can zoom back into that, and hopefully those that are following me will follow in on that zoom again. The other thing is you'll notice some of the words there are underlined, and those are hyperlinks. So those will link directly through to other parts of that interactive board. So I'm going to click now onto how to use Miro. And that will take me to that board. So I'm just going to bring everybody here. So there's a bit of a description there with a few handy hints. So first of which is that you can zoom in and out, as I did before. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll probably see at the moment something that says 31% or a zoom level. If you hover over that or click on it, then it will bring up a little menu that enables you to zoom out, zoom in, zoom to the entire board, sort of navigate yourself around. You can also, there's a very handy feature, pin a map, so sort of an overview map, and that will give you a navigator at a glance. So once you get to know where things are, you can zoom in on that. The next and probably most important thing is how to add post-it notes to the board, because we're going to be using that quite a lot later on. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you will see a sort of vertical menu bar. And certainly on mine, the fourth item down is a sort of a little square with a folded over corner. That's a post-it note, sticky note. So you can click on that and drop that onto the canvas anywhere you like, and then write on it as you would if you were in a physical space with a whiteboard. The other thing is, you'll notice if you select that you can make that larger or smaller. So if then it's actually massive or very tiny, and drag the corners to make it larger. You can also move those post-it notes around if it's not sort of appeared in quite the right space. There'll be an opportunity. As I said, if you're trying to find where you're supposed to be and you've disappeared off, the easiest thing to do is to sort of zoom out to the top level, and hopefully that will then give you a sense of finding where you're at. Alternatively, the map, the little sort of overview map view is useful. And I think I probably covered that. So the next thing to do, and I think it looks like quite a few of you are there already, is actually to start putting your names on post-it notes. So for those of you who've managed to get this far, it's taking a while to zoom around there. There we go. For those of you that are already on the board, I'll bring everyone else here. If you could just quickly practice that skill of placing post-it notes by creating your name on there, and it'd be really helpful if you could put not only your name but where you come from, if you feel you are able to do that. So whether it's an organisation or if you're part of a community group, and also we'd be really interested to know what's the reason that brought you here today. What is it that made you want to come along to this session and get involved in the discussion? So if you feel like you can drop a super quick sort of note on there, just saying why you've arrived. I can see lots of people putting things on there, so this is great. So not only does this help us understand who's here, it also means that we've got a record of who's turned up, and we could then potentially keep in touch with you or share with you post the event. There's going to be opportunities to go through something else before we get into the full discussion session. So there'll be another exercise we'll go through where you get to stick post-it notes. Just in case, I think I meant, or no, may not have mentioned, if you don't wish to go over to the sidebar, if you just press N, that will put under your cursor a post-it note. So that's a really quick way of creating a post-it note. A couple of people are finding the ability to draw arrows. If you drag one of the little circles underneath any item on Miro, it will draw a line from the thing that you've selected to wherever else you want to go. That might be useful. That might be useful when it comes to the sessions in the afternoon if you want to link things together. Don't worry if not. It's if you don't use it, it's not necessary. But okay.
Thanks, Giles. Yeah. There's a couple of people in the chat.
Oh yes, sorry. Thanks.
What we're going to do is we're going to go back to Claire from Yorkshire Water, who's going to talk us through the context behind the data. And we're going to go back to Miro in a second, because we're going to ask people. So when Claire's speaking, we've got a little job for everyone to do, which is to think of the 5 data sets they would like water companies in the UK to publish next. So this is a way of crowdsourcing a workflow for Yorkshire Water, but other water companies in the UK. And we're going to go back to the Miro board so you can practice again, putting those 5 data sets onto another frame within the Miro board. So don't worry, we're going to give another test and we'll be able to help people through that process there. So what I'd like to do, if there's any questions, please put them in the chat. But what I'd like to do now is ask Claire from Yorkshire Water to lead the conversation. I think you've got a couple of your colleagues going to join in as well, to take us through some of the background data that's been published and also the context of why we're here today. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Apologies in advance, I've had my internet start to freeze, so if I freeze for a portion of this, yes, apologies, it's a dodgy internet connection this morning of all morning. So welcome to everybody, and thank you everyone for your time for this event. And as Paul mentioned earlier, I'm sure everyone's here because we care about the river quality and improving it, and certainly the release of the storm overflow data has absolutely captured the public interest in terms of the operation of our storm overflows and the health of the UK's rivers. The use of rivers is certainly increasing in terms of recreation. I think it's something that we're seeing through green recovery, through COVID, that people are accessing nature more for health and wellbeing benefits. And a lot of work has been done already on improving rivers over a number of years, probably the last 30 years, certainly huge improvements in rivers, post-industrialisation and investment into quality improvements, but there's still more to do to get us to good ecological status, and I'm sure that's why we're all here today. So Richard Emmett, our Director of Public Affairs, couldn't be with us this morning, but certainly he set up this event with the purpose really of understanding how open data can be really powerful in terms of starting change and creating greater insight and informing the public and generating more interest in areas where improvements can be made. For those that weren't at the Wharfe event, we did give quite a bit of context at that event in terms of why we have storm overflows and kind of how the storm overflow data has come to be. So I was just going to give a really quick overview of that, and then I was going to hand over to some of the colleagues in our wastewater asset management team to talk about some of the data, how the data has come to be, what it is measuring, and then our data science team around the actual data itself and what it's showing us and how the data can be interpreted and used. So just in terms of a bit of a recap in terms of the context of storm overflows. So the reason that we have storm overflows are because they're a product of our largely legacy combined sewer network. And that's due to municipal engineering around drainage in our towns and cities probably over the last 100 years. Storm overflows are there because our network sits at the confluence with the Ouse at Cawood, which is just downstream of Tadcaster. And it's got really a variety of different features. Upstream is dominated by largely limestone, which could mean that it can be quite flashy and respond quickly to rainfall, and then it meanders its way, down the course and down to the confluence with the Ouse. In terms of improvements, the Wharfe has been really key. So we use the Wharfe as strategic. It's got 2 abstraction points and a number of reservoirs in the Yorkshire National Park area, and it's key for water supply for drinking water. On the waste side, we've invested heavily on wastewater treatment works improvements, most notably as part of our phosphorus improvement programme at Otley, Wetherby, Parch, and this 5-year period at Drafton. And we're also investigating a number of frequently spilling overflows in the Wharfes. There's 9 of those we're investigating as part of our 5-year plan. So in terms of the bathing water quality at Ilkley, so the Ilkley Clean Rivers Group have been really successful at gaining bathing water quality, which obviously for us is a very exciting opportunity to gain and work out what needs to be done to gain bathing water standards on the river. The river is also measured via ecological standards by the Water Framework Directive, and so there's kind of 2 key drivers now. There's both the ecological health and also public health associated with the bathing water. And in terms of some of the wider data sets we'd be interested in exploring, we'll talk a little bit in a moment about storm overflows and the data associated with storm overflows, but also we've linked to data from the Environment Agency, their Catchment Data Explorer, and that kind of covers some of the broader data sources such as the Water Framework Directive information and some of the reasons for not achieving good on the Water Framework Directive. Also other data would be quite useful to form a broader picture of the Wharfe, such as river monitoring data, some of the citizen science work that's been carried out as well. So to really give us a really good broad view of what's going on in the Wharfe. So for me, I'd be really keen to understand how what sorts of data do we think would be really useful to understand the impact on river health? What else is out there? What do we want from us, from a water company perspective? What do we need from others? And ultimately, how can we look at this from a catchment scale and use kind of good data understanding to drive interventions at a catchment scale? And again, not just from Yorkshire Water perspective, but working in partnership with stakeholders, yourselves, that are on the call as well. And finally, in doing that, we're really interested to see how can we do that in more of a low carbon and nature-based way and kind of move away from some of the traditional solutions. And certainly within my team, I'm in the wastewater and environmental strategy team, and we're certainly looking at how can we look at things more holistically and as more of a systems impact. And as we know, the sewer system can be a complex system, and that also interacts with the river system, which is also another complex system with multiple inputs that could be influencing the water quality. And as part of this event, we're really keen to know how could we use open data and using different data sources together, and what could that do to give us this overall picture of river health, and how could that be used to influence our policies and also our regulators, and apply some of the principles that we think are really valuable off the back of this event. So that's a little bit more about the kind of general context. Hopefully you were all at the warm-up event as well. And I was just going to hand over to Mark Evans, who's going to talk in more detail specifically about the storm overflow event duration monitoring data on site. So I'll hand over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Morning, everybody. So today we've shared data from two of our sewage treatment works which feed into the River Wharfe, which are Poole Sewage Treatment Works and Ilkley Sewage Treatment Works. The three data sets that we shared from them sites is the FFT incoming flow data, and then we've also got the ultrasonics which measure the discharge points to the River Wharfe in terms of storm discharge. I'll talk you through the three individual ones now. So yeah, just to jump back on that, the two individual storm tank discharges are the one that get taken towards the EDM data collection. So first of all, the FFT data. So that is a 15-minute average data of the incoming flows into the sewage treatment works that is measured throughout the day. That data measures flows up to the consented flow that the site needs to treat as part of its permit. Any flows that exceed that limit will then get discharged to one of the two storm discharge points. Flows up to 6 times the normal dry weather flow will go via the storm tank route. Any flows above that will take a separate route, which is then screened and then makes its way to the River Wharfe. So in terms of that data, I mentioned earlier, it's 15-minute average data. The flows coming into these sites are a split between gravity flows from the sewer networks and pump flows that come in. The gravity flows quite consistent, the pump flows quite intermittent, so they make up around 30% of the incoming flows. So the min and max elements of the flows during that 15-minute can vary quite substantially. So it gives a representative of that snapshot, but yeah, there's a lot of tolerance within that average that could influence it. So moving on to the other 2 points, in terms of the flows up to 6 times, they are separated from the incoming flow and go through the on-site storm tanks. We have an EDM monitor which sits in a representative storm tank, monitoring the level on a 15-minute instantaneous data. So what you'll see in the data set is a snapshot of the level of the storm tanks at any 15-minute interval period. Very challenging data to try and get accurate. In effect, we are trying to measure a really small margin of the spill over a weir at the far end of a storm tank, which has challenges within the instrumentation that we use, which is an ultrasonic device. A failure to get that as accurate as we need to be can result in a high spill frequency and high durations, or zero spill frequency if we're just slightly outside of that banding. So one of the big challenges we have is the accuracy of that data and the instrumentation that we use to manage it. That data is then taken, so we capture the time that we record a spill from them storm tanks. So in effect, when you look at the data where you see 100% on the analog reading, we will generate a digital alarm which says we are now discharging from these storm tanks. That data then gets taken and transferred into our EDM submission, which is put into the 1224 format, which Claire talked about earlier, which summarises the spills over the year, giving us a comparable measure against all the other water companies. But like I say, the data provided today is the actual raw data of the stop-start spills that we see from site, and also the analog data showing the levels in the storm tanks. So that's the storm tank discharge. The second point would be the flows over 6 times normal dry weather flow, which are then separated and sent via a wet well level to the River Wharfe. Again, not as challenging as the storm tank data, a lot more dynamic in the levels that we're measuring, and usually gives us a lot more consistent data going through that route. But both of them, in terms of them data, the analog, as I mentioned, is an instantaneous level, so not an average like we talked on the FFT data. The digital is an actual timestamp as well, so it doesn't wait for the 15-minute, it's a timestamp data that would pick up when we are spilling and when we are not spilling. And that's about it in terms of the 3 data sets that you've got today. So yeah, 2 digital points for the 2 spill points, 2 analog points for, again, the same instruments, and the FFT data that comes into both of them sites. Okay, thank you. And over to Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. You covered a lot of that data there, but just so I'm a data scientist at Yorkshire Water, just to give a bit more context into what that data is. So I come from a purely data perspective, which some of you might, and just to raise some things to be aware of with this data. So there are elements, a lot of what Mark and Claire have just spoken about, where specifically with the ultrasound, there can be difficulties in these measurements, they are telemetry. So there will be data quality issues and quirks to be aware of with this data, and then there are ways to handle that. The main element is, as with any kind of telemetry live stream data that we get, it is you can have periods of missing data for sometimes short periods of time. So it's to be aware of that there can be gaps in the data, and that's always something that we can investigate further, but that does happen. It's the nature of telemetry. Also possible outliers, so where we've had issues with maybe with calibration, so maybe 100% isn't seeing as exactly 100%, so there's a calibration issue, but also really large outliers for very short periods of time, and those can be due to all sorts of reasons, but it is because of the environment that it's in the storm tank. Even things like spider webs can cause strange quirks in the data. So it's just to be aware that sometimes it's not quite as you see. There, you know, it is data and it is telemetry. There will be things to be aware of in the data like that. The other thing to be aware of is just how to compare the data. So we have the digital alarms, which are timestamps, versus the analog, which is 15-minute instantaneous. And then with the flow data, that is 15-minute averages. And that difference in resolution it's something to be aware of. There could be very short cases where either a pump is on, or there's a very, very short spill, or something is happening, or it's being kept at the tank and there's a little bit of variation within a 15 minutes. And that's also something to be aware of, just that differences in resolution between these data sets when making comparison. Also makes it challenging from some of the kind of big data analysis point of view, but it's also worth keeping in mind that there are these differences in resolution as well as possible missing data, although I think these two are actually quite good for that. So that's just to cover some of the data context. If anyone has any specific questions, by all means, come to me, as I work with this data a lot. But otherwise, I think I will pass to Stephen Nutter to give a little bit of a wider context of this data.
Thank you all. So yeah, I'm Stephen Nutter, Data Science Manager at Yorkshire Water. So I guess we've talked a bit background of EDM, the kind of physical site infrastructure, the data that manifests from that site infrastructure. And I just want to touch on the systems behind all that. So like most water companies, we've been evolving, been changing our data infrastructure that collects all this is no different. So what you see today is an extract from our large kind of on-premise systems that masters the data. It's an Excel extract, no fancy stuff there. We are moving, we are changing all the time, and we're making the transition towards cloud, but this is obviously a long process to go through with a lot of kind of integration elements to do. The reason it's important is just for any kind of context of open data. We want to make sure that data that released it is valid, it's governed, it's trustable, and often the raw data contains the anomalies and quirks that Mark and Susan have just expressed and communicated, that we just got to be kind of mindful of. So that kind of transition is really important. And as any data practitioner or anyone who uses data knows, the raw data never tells the full story. So this discussion is just really, really important, isn't it, to kind of air these things and just have a kind of wider debate about it. So yeah, lots going on as always, and yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. I think I'll hand back to Paul.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and the rest of the Yorkshire Water team. So hopefully you've been doing a bit of thinking whilst Yorkshire Water were discussing there, and I'm going to hand over to Giles in a minute, who's just going to show us how to use the Miro board to add some post-its of your 5 data sets you wish you had. The Yorkshire Water team are with us most of the day today to help us. So it may be that this data already exists, it might be published somewhere else. One of the things we do find a lot with the work we do in innovation is that the future's here, it's just not equally distributed, or the data's here, it's just not equally distributed or easy to find, or not indexed on Google, and it's not an easy place to find. So I am guessing that maybe 10 or 20% of the requests will already exist on the web. It's just not quite signposted or made easy to find. And then the other part of it is, okay, what other data sets we would like? And if you also think about it, how we might combine data sets to make them more valuable or usable. So weather, geology, hydrogeology, environmental data, it's not just a flag that says pollution incident here. There is a whole load of other parts that make that data usable and reproducible, and actually something that we can make a decision from or make some support from. So I've been filling deliberately to try and get you some time to think about this. And I'm now going to hand over to Giles, who's going to share his screen and show you how to put a post-it on the frame which says, which data sets would you like to see?
Indeed I am, yes. So first of it, I've just put the link for those of you that want to go directly to this, to the board yourself and do it. But I will share the screen just so that we get a chance to see the
That's not showing in the chat yet, Giles.
Oh, sorry, I think I just might have sent it to somebody. I've just been having a bit of a chat with somebody who are just helping out. I'm going to share it again. Sorry.
We can see this now, Giles.
Sorry, say again.
You can see it now.
Yeah, I'm just going to send the link through as well. There we go. There we go. That's gone to everybody now. So, a couple of things I discovered in the discussion I was just having is there's a really helpful feature at the top here, which is to turn off everybody else's cursors, particularly when there's 30 odd people dashing around on the board. It can be quite visually noisy, so that's a really useful thing to do. So I'll just point that out to you. And I can see a bunch of people have managed to get notes on there already. But so just to run through that process again. What you want to do is to go over to the sticky note icon in the corner here, or as it says there, you can just press the letter N on your keyboard. That will give you a choice of colours of post-it note, which you can grab hold of, and then just pop it down there. And then, so I'll delete this one in a second because I don't have a particular piece of data that I want to be shared. But just put, say, data set. That's a bit big, so I can go and quickly resize to medium size, and that will make it a bit smaller. Or if I wish, I can go and drag it to be bigger. So that's the sort of simple way of adding post-it notes onto the board. If you double click on it, then you can go in and edit the text on there. and then if you've put something on which you want to get rid of, just select, and then you can press the delete key on your keyboard, or go and select each from the menu in the top for creating creating post-it notes. But what we're really interested in here is are there data sets that you would like to see published by either Yorkshire Water or by other parties that have some involvement in the River Wharfe, so maybe the Environment Agency or similar. Are there data sets you'd be interested in terms of the recreational use of the Wharfe? Are there data sets you're aware of that you'd like to publicise more? And maybe some data that you're part of a group that collects, as Paul's been mentioned a couple of times, and there's sort of a bunch of citizen science work going on. So this is just an opportunity for you to catch that information. And what we'll do is we'll sort of write this all up, capture that, and that will be published as part of the output. But it's also there for reference for the afternoon discussions. What we'll also do, if you're really struggling with using Miro because of technology, because of for whatever reason, we'll also make sure that we're always sharing one of the boards related to the discussion you're part of in the chat. So as when we break out into the afternoon session, we'll always have sorry, the morning session later on, we will have the board where that data is being collected. So if you wish to sort of use it in those terms and then just contribute to this discussion verbally, that will be perfectly fine too. Paul.
Okay. Thanks, Giles. If you want to just, so we hopefully people have found that. And I'm just reading through some of the comments there on the Miro board. So hopefully people have worked out how this might work. Please do add more to that Miro board. We'll tag it up a little bit in a second, just so it's readable. And I'm just picking up. So remember that the catchment hosts already have access to loads of data sets for each river. I think that if whoever said that, if they know of the specifics around that, that'll be great. Grow a bit more than that. I guess that's river flow monitoring, not river fly monitoring. The sewer maps. Again, yeah, so if people come back, be more specific, and then this will turn into requests that Yorkshire Water will use in the future in their workflow. With that, that's part of the reason we're doing this in the open is to help Yorkshire Water work out what to do next and how to prioritise, because obviously there are a million priorities and they're all urgent at any one time. So helping do that. So Riverfly, Jeff, do you want to just is there a link to that, or maybe someone that could be explain a little bit more to us? That would be great. So what happens next is if Giles, do you want to go back just to the agenda and
yeah, of course,
on your screen?
I was just going to really quickly say there's another feature which I see Matt has discovered, which is the ability to add an emoji to an existing post-it notes. Thanks, Ben, for the link to the
fantastic.
You can add an emoji. Just if you select that, you'll get this menu popping up at the top. That's a really good way of voting for something. So if somebody's already said the thing you want and you just want to amplify that, then just please feel free to use that feature. Yes, I'll just head back to the agenda though, so I'll click on this link here.
And I think as with all these things, whenever we do innovation events or collaboration events, new ideas come up, and I think if you think about this data, a lot of it is very useful for when we're looking at climate change or planning or land use planning. So in the same way that these assets could be used for pollution monitoring, a lot of this could then be used for having detailed climate change adaptation plans for the River Wharfe, and making them open and usable and able to be much more reactive is also part of it. So we're always looking at how we can create assets that are usable across many different contexts. So this is the agenda. We've got the top 5 data sets. If there is something specific that you wished that Yorkshire Water did publish, we've been quite general there. That I think so. We might look at that and see if there are some specific examples of a particular outflow or a place on the River Wharfe that you wished you had more data on, a location or a specific determinant or analysis that you wished you could see. Please put that in there as well. So that the more detailed we can, the better on that. So what we're going to do next is, hopefully we've shown you the context behind this. We've shown you how to use Miro, and we've also allowed you to have a conversation, maybe make some new connections. I know there's some private messaging going along on Zoom. We're going to have a cup of tea now, and then what we're going to do is set up the people on the call into 3 different breakout discussions. And we've done what we'd normally do if we're in the space, we would, people in the room would decide what we're going to talk about. We then coalesce around that and we do a collaborative workflow. But because we're virtual, we've done a little bit of homework beforehand and created 3 different groups that people are going to join after we've had a tea break at 11:15. So I think if we're a little bit ahead of schedule, if we say we will come back at 11:05, back into the Zoom. You can just turn your camera off or go on mute and come back. But we're going to start around 11:05 with the next session. We're going to create 3 different breakout groups in Zoom, and you'll be able to join it when you come back. It'll be on your list. You'll be able to join the different groups. The 3 groups are, Giles, if you just want to show the, can you zoom out and show the 3? There we go. So we've got, we looked at what's happened before. So we've got questions around how do we support Yorkshire Water to influence policy and then make investment. That's a massive subject in itself. Looking at the data, so we've got data quality, data veracity, data, the timing of that, all of the things that, if you think about data quality in its broadest sense, you know, how do you make sense of the data that's being published? And then we've got what we call local perspectives. So that's what do people want to see in the data they might be getting? And we're trying to talk specifically about the Wharfe, but that could be applied to many different rivers in Yorkshire. So, and what we're going to do is we're going to run a loosely facilitated session where we look at what our hopes and our fears are, so the positives and negatives around the areas that we're looking at, ideas that we might have that could be implemented over the next 5 years, and then also some actions. So if there are specific actions that we know about that we could, if we were able to implement tomorrow, something that is clear, very specific, but we could implement that tomorrow, we'll put that in the Miro frames as well. There'll be 3 ODI leads people across these teams and also Yorkshire Water. So what we'll do now is I'll stop talking, people put the kettle on, have a brew, and then we'll come back just after 11:05, and we'll move into the next sessions. If there's any questions, just let us know. We'll stay on the Zoom, and if there's queries, and then we'll put the links to the frames in the chat afterwards as well. Thanks very much, anyone. I'm just going to check my chat to see if there's anything there. Okay. Right, I'm going to get a brew. See you in a second. Would be nice. Okay, so hopefully everyone's had their tea and a flapjack. James just said we're into tech consult. Well, we need to do it in the open. We need to open this up and share this as widely as possible. It's all about opening up our the insight and generating lots of shared value. around this. And if you want to talk about open source models and how they come into beat the closed models, I'd be very happy to have a session.
We should do a Q's and brews session, Paul, I think.
That's it. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but
well, ask questions and have a cup of tea.
There we go. Yeah, Q's and brews. That's the next one. Yeah. So the team are going to put the breakout groups in the Zoom now. Welcome back, everyone. Most people are still with us. This is great stuff. Fantastic. We had a fantastic discussion on local issues and citizen science, and I got to nerd out about field testing versus lab testing and its quality, which is fantastic. Me and Jeff had a, if you're not getting your hands dirty and getting wet, it's not real work, which I can agree with him on that. So we're going to have a lunch break now. If we could just, Giles, could you just share your screen and pull up the Miro board agenda?
Yeah, will do. Hang on a sec.
Just remind ourselves what we're going to do.
Just create a post-it.
Yeah. So we're going to 5 minutes. We're going to break for lunch. We're going to look at the Miro boards and see if there are themes that are coming out that people would want to discuss. This is more of an open discussion. If you've ever been to an unconference, this might be something that you would get involved with. So we're going to put, when we come back after lunch at 1:15, we'll spend 5 or 10 minutes working out between us what are the subjects we'd like to explore in a bit more depth, maybe, or someone, if anyone on the call would like to lead a discussion and ask people to join them, they're more than welcome to do that. If you just put a comment in the Zoom chat, you can do that.
So I'll just point out there is also a board. It seems we're doing everything through Miro. There's a place where you can actually drop your suggestions for there, and if you feel like you would like to lead a discussion there because there's a topic you are particularly passionate about, then please let us know in there as well.
Yeah. So we're going to put some suggested discussion topics on here, and then as a group we'll decide what are the most important ones is, and we'll get people to put dots or marks against each of those discussion areas, and then we'll set up breakout groups for people to do that this afternoon. So if there are any points or people want to make out of the groups that they just had, we've got a couple of minutes now, you can make them. Otherwise, we'll grab some lunch and we'll see you back at 1:15. I'm just looking at the chat. Duncan's asking someone to share the link, which I'm sure we could do that. And we'll put some suggested discussion topics in here, but if people could do the same, that would be great. I'll just see that. A swimmer's code of conduct, an open one. That's great. We've got there's also possibly a data standard that we might want to build, and also publishing data as well. So we'll put some suggestions up here, and people can join us later on. Would anyone like to? Has anyone gotten something that's on their mind that they need to share, or are we all happy to come back at 1:15? Right, I've got away with that. We'll look forward to seeing you all at 1:15. See you later. Welcome back. Hopefully you had some lunch and didn't have to do lots of emails. So we still have 38 participants, which is great. I think we've lost one, maybe. So we'll just give people a couple of seconds just to make sure that we're all online. this part of the afternoon is a little bit more open in the discussions, and I share my screen. On the Miro board here, we've got some suggested afternoon discussion topics. If everyone could have a quick look at the topics that people have suggested. If there's something that you would really like to talk about, please either post it. Then when we've captured the things that people would like to talk about, we'll just ask people in 5 minutes time to put a thumbs up on the ones they would like to talk about. Then we'll set up a Zoom breakout and we can jump on those calls. And then what we've done is we've set up a larger afternoon discussion session so people can put all of their comments onto here. And then you also might want to look at what other people have said in their frames above, which might inform what we'll talk about this afternoon. So, okay. So, what do customers want and what will they pay for? A swimmer's code of conduct. That's quite interesting. I think also possibly some information for people to make decisions. Sounds a very specific one. If the Environment Agency policy for permitting, well, I guess that's CSO permitting. Data, a discussion around the whole catchment water quality approach. That sounds simple, doesn't it? But I bet it's really hard. Linking users, stewards, and stakeholders. How do we do that? A particular one for me was what came out of our session in the morning is, so what data do we have? Where is it? How do we publish it? How do we make it easy for people to find? And so that is transparency in the RiverData itself, but also the models that are used. And Matt's put a thumbs up on that. So there's the data visualization of the River Wharfe for leisure purposes. I think that's linked to the Swimmers Code of Conduct, because maybe okay. There's quite a lot of it. You know, how do we get good data? How do we get good data early? How do we pay for it? How do we make sure it works? Yeah. My ice always melting. Okay, so if people could start putting the thumbs up on the ones that they would like to talk about. I'm going to link the transparency and RiverData models to what, where, or how we're publishing models. So what I'm going to ask now, so we've got 10 people of what do customers want and what are they willing to pay for? 9, 10 people, 11 people for that. We've got 9 people, 11 people, the whole water quality, whole catchment monitoring. And I guess they are linked to existing partnerships and stewards. So there's probably 15 people on that, and then we've got what, where, and how do we publish data and transparency. So we've got 13 people over here. And there's a updating the policy. I think that's probably linked to the initial policy recommendations for government as well. Okay, so we've moved the how to get funding into where to publish, because obviously without data you can't publish it. We've got these 3 ones here. Got these 3 subjects here. We've got a policy piece here. And then we've got the what people to pay for, and then the data visualization. I guess that's maybe what do we publish, how do we do it, how do we create visualization, and then I can't move but the swimmer's code of conduct could link to, that could be an output of the data that's been published, and how do people so is that Leah who's who's put the developing a swimmer's code of conduct sessions there? Just let me know who's done that.
Yeah, that was me. It probably, I was thinking if it goes in with anything, it probably fits more with the reviewers and users and stewards. It's
maybe, but I think it's a specific thing that's worth having a discussion. So if you were happy to lead that,
yeah, I'm quite happy to lead it. Yeah,
great. So, so the people who wanted to join that,
I was just thinking you were trying to group them. That was all.
yeah, it's exactly what. We have infinite space and stuff, so if people would like to join that, so what we're going to do is we're going to, if you just bear with us for a couple of minutes, we're going to set up a room for what the customers want and what will they pay for, a swimmer's code of conduct, policy review, and then the whole catchment piece, and then the data publishing, transparency, funding, visualization at the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups that we're going to set up. And then we'll do same thing as we did last time in Zoom, where people can just join them as we go. Giles, do you want to pick up what the customers want and what are they willing to pay for? There. If someone from Yorkshire Water could pick up the policy piece around recommendations for government and EA policy. And also, and if I pick up the data publishing work, possibly with Claire. And then
support the catchment water quality one, Paul.
So you're going to pick up that, Duncan?
Yeah, I didn't put it down. I didn't put it down, but I'm happy to support it.
So if you could help lead that, maybe with Jeff's help, because Jeff was having quite a there. So, and then we need someone from Yorkshire Water who's going to pick up the.
I think Ian's going to go for that one.
Fab. Ian.
Wolsey.
Okay, great. And then if the Yorkshire Water team could jump on each one of those to make sure that we've got enough representation, I'm sure we have. With that. And then
just on the whole catchment quality, there's quite a lot of discussion we had in the policy group around that. There's probably some useful notes there worth reviewing as part of that discussion.
Cool. So I think if we look in the if I stop sharing now. I'll just go on mute. So we're just going to open the rooms now, and then if you could join the one you want to join. is on the agenda. You just get that agenda back. Share my screen. Hopefully, you can have a look around at the Miro board and see what other people have been discussing. And hopefully, you can see that we've captured a whole load of work outputs. Very interesting data sets. So that's the agenda.
Also worth noting, Paul, that we've captured loads in the chat that we haven't yet moved across onto the Miro.
Yeah, okay. Yes, so we will capture that and put that in there. So we've got, I think we've got a bit of a decision to make now, is that we could get people to feedback from the breakout groups and have a break, or we could just do a quick summary now and finish a little bit earlier. And I don't know about you, I need probably another ice lolly and go back from that. So if that's how people would like to do it, we could probably put 5 or 10 minutes now and finish at 2:30. And I'm going to ask someone from Yorkshire Water just to help me with the what happens next piece. So I might pick on Duncan or Stephen or Claire just to close up at the end. So we're going to fill for a bit, but if Duncan or Stephen or Claire could ever think about what happens next after this, with what we've created here, the assets and how we move forward, that would be grand. So we've just been talking on the big Miro board here. I'll just go to the, there we go. Would someone like to talk about what customers want and what they're willing to pay for a couple of minutes?
I can do that, I think. So yeah, we had quite a lot of discussion about the sort of the tension between funding cycles, which sort of a 5-year plan sort of things, and basically before you set off, you've got to have gone through that whole process, compared with customer voices, and particularly very vocal customer voices, which are sort of expecting faster responses to problems. And clearly there's a tension there. So in part, it's a little bit about speeding the process up to the extent that that's possible, looking at creative ways of combining sort of funding sources from players in the industry or other organisations, but also informing and making end users, inverted commas, more aware of that, of how the industry works and actually what the disruption of major works might actually end up being, and the costs associated with that. So that's a little bit about awareness of the infrastructure and awareness of what's feasible. There was also a discussion about the fact that some aspects of water quality are very visible. So large things floating down the river are visible. Sources of other sorts of environmental pollution, whether that be bacteriological or chemical, so runoff from farming and the like, are not so visible. So there's definitely some education around that also required, and this all goes into sort of helping customers understand what they genuinely want, if you like. They might say don't want the big things floating down the river, but actually they should be much more worried about the things they're not able to see in terms of bathing quality, for example. Now I can't see the board, you popped over it, Paul. Thank you. So the really interesting things that came out of that was a, can we start to work as an industry or as a series of stewards and stakeholders to build that sort of simple messaging around some of the challenges, and that's Yorkshire Water, Environment Agency, and others, I think, sort of are part of that. and then something that Stephen rightly picked up on was this action around understanding if there's a way that we can combine with those other stakeholders to potentially get a better outcome for everybody. So yeah, it's quite a lot about understanding how complex the system is, really, in a way. That's probably the most stuff I can take out of that in a short notice.
Thanks, Giles. I'm quite interested in the. I'm looking forward to the Swimmers Code of Conduct. So over to whoever was leading that session, please.
I'm Ben Aston here. I'm happy to talk unless you want to, Elaine. If I don't hear anything, I'll.
We can share it between us, can't we? I think.
Do you want to take the lead and then I'll chip in?
Okay. We basically, we didn't come to any conclusions, but we had quite an interesting chat around some of the issues with swimming, and particularly the large increase in numbers of people, and the fact that there's a lot of people getting to a lot of different places, and the impact that can have on the river, and how do you find a balance between people's desire to swim and sort of protecting the environment that they're actually swimming in. So one of the difficult issues that was identified was that there isn't any kind of, I don't know what you might call, sort of official organisation to liaise with. So I think it might have been Ben actually made the point that if you're dealing with people fishing, you can go for the British, sort of the Angling Association or whatever, whereas there isn't anything when you're talking about people who want to just go in the river and have a swim. So there's a bit of a communication difficulty there, and we had a bit of a chat about how you might manage to do that through working with individuals, and then getting that information shared through individual swimming groups. And yeah, then we moved into discussion about sort of sharing other information about things like invasive species, and whether it would actually be best to have some sort of website that was there with all the definitive information on it that you could then pinpoint different swimming groups to. Do you want to add anything to that, Ben?
I think the two elements just to draw out as well was it's basically something, because it doesn't necessarily have a strong voice, that needs to be reflected in discussions about when we're talking about who's using the river and how the river is being used. It might not have a group necessarily representing wild swimmers, but we can't forget about it, because it cuts across a lot of other different groups, so it should be included in those planning discussions. We talked about there is bits of data out there that are really of use to people, but there's so many different websites you might want to check before you head out. It can be problematic and access that information. And then I think the main thing, yeah, like you said, it's about education. It's like the Countryside Code of Conduct, or about educating people about barbecues. It's in many people's interests for people to respect the environment. A lot of the time, it might just be inadvertent people not realizing they're doing the wrong thing, and it's what an appropriate message is to get out to people that also fits in with what else the other message is going out. And if we end up with sticking up 70 signs along the river, then it's sort of defeating the point and it's spoiling the environment we're trying to create. So it's not straightforward, but it's not something we should ignore because it's not straightforward.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I think that's a really good. It's not a failure to say we're not quite sure what to do, but we know we need to do something. That's definitely there. Okay, we've got the policies one, and also the data publishing session. I was in the data publishing session here. I'm going to ask Claire and Susan to join me on feeding back on that. But the main thing for me in terms of the data publishing and visualization and funding was that helping Yorkshire Water realise that being open first is probably going to help them internally as much as helping everyone else, and communicating on a company that has many different aspects, different groups, probably is a bit siloed itself internally. Being as open as possible about every piece of data that it's collecting and publishing, and being open by default in that, is probably going to help them significantly and reduce costs, and maybe find some extra funding for monitoring as well. So that was my part, was helping the Yorkshire Water people on the call realise that actually being as open as possible themselves is going to be super helpful for them in doing their day jobs, which then obviously creates a whole load of surplus and opportunity for other people to take advantage of the data that they're publishing. So Claire and Susan, would you like to add anything else?
I had to jump off that group, and I joined another group. So, but yeah, from my perspective, I don't have anything to add to what you've just mentioned yet.
Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I think the other was just, it was just useful to think through examples that we have seen of good open data, especially around sharing documentation and how to share the knowledge that, say, as a data scientist in Yorkshire Water, the knowledge that I would gain through going through our business, thinking about, actually, we're not just thinking about data in terms of numbers, we're thinking about how do we share documentation with that, and what does that look like, and what does good look like, and there are some examples on there that I think definitely go away and have a look at.
Fantastic. And the last session is the policy, and the big one there is ban wet wipes. So who would like to take us through the policy issues?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that one. Yeah, ban wet wipes just happen to have the biggest font. And it's a nice simple message, but yeah, we'll go with that. There's a mixture of different scale of things. There's a recognition there of the time frames for change, and that if there is going to be change, it's got to come from the top. So the influence has got to be from the ministers. And there's a bit about kind of bringing the different parties together. So we've got things like highway drainage. If it's not a combined effort between the water companies, the highways, and the local authorities, then that's the policies are not likely to give the results we want. There were some specific things on water company billing. For example, would providing specific information about how little, how much is spent on networks be useful, and could that be able to be influenced to possibly increase that portion of the bill? Some influence there needed on Ofwat and government as well, to say that that's actually acceptable for the bills to increase for specific storm water management purposes. There's also, for example, possibly to have initiatives similar to insulation. So where the government wants to push a certain technique or technology, then they derive funds for it. So could householders be encouraged to do their own bits, or whether it be small developers, a bit of work going into that. I think there's another bit that came out was maybe a little bit more for the Environment Agency to be able to do, whether that's because they need additional resource to do it, and things like reviewing permits and that side of it. I think I've covered most of that.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. So I think we're just about done. I think Richard Emmett has joined us. Richard, are you there?
Yes, not quite fast enough on the trigger with my mute button.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Paul, I just wanted to drop in and mention about our room as well, because I think that's been left out.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's fine. Let you leave the best to last.
Absolutely. I'll get back to sharing my screen and.
Sorry, Richard, to cut you up there.
Sorry.
We had a very enthusiastic conversation about a range of topics, really. I know we initially started out talking about the whole catchment view, but it quite quickly spiraled into a range of different topics, from around having greater visibility of the existing data sets out there, and potentially who should be owning that, to which the resounding response was the catchment hosts. There was a lot of fervent enthusiasm for us really reaching back into that pool of knowledge, there was even quite critical assessments of why we're even running this event, and whether we should rather be kind of championing these causes through use of the catchment partnerships that are already established, which I think there was a lot of nodding heads, not in terms of this being a futile event, but more how do we close the gap between what we're trying to do here and what is already being done elsewhere. There was also a lot of nodding heads around how we should be learning from other countries. There was a lot of expertise in our room around other examples of how to conduct our businesses on rivers and water courses in the likes of France and Germany, even Australia and New Zealand. There were some anecdotal case studies that we could draw on, and not just about how to approach water quality in these rivers, but also how to go about fulfilling our designated bathing waters remit, because obviously in France and Germany they're a lot more established, lot more mature than perhaps they are in the UK. So we could learn a lot about that and potentially speeding up the process there. And then Jeff's final point was around actually this isn't just about the Wharfe, this is about the larger remit of Yorkshire and how we can take the learnings from today and also the catchment partnerships that we've already got in place to build out a much stronger programme across the wider Yorkshire region, which I'm sure Richard will be really pleased to hear. So yeah, some really good stuff.
Thanks, Duncan. And then we just got a couple of questions in the chat, which I think are related to that, about could we summarise this outputs to the Yorkshire Dales River Trust Catchment Partnership. So we will be capturing all this and writing it all on the RiverData webpage, so it'll all be there for everyone to access, use and share. All the commentaries there, all the Google Docs are there, so people can see this and how we're going to do that. Richard Emmett's going to join us just a minute, just sort of what happens next. And then I think there's, Jeff picked a really good point around the mention of farming and other landowner practices which have a massive impact on the rivers. And I think we all accept that highways infrastructure, agriculture, other landowners are all part of this process, and it's not just measuring the water quality out at the end of the pipe for the Yorkshire Water. So
yeah,
absolutely, and I think we need to find a way of encouraging those landowners and agricultural people to join us, whether they join a Zoom call and a Miro board. I'm not sure, but we need to find a way of influencing them. But we need as long as we've got the basics here, and that's what we're trying to do here, is create the infrastructure and the basis for discussions. So I'm going to ask Richard just to help me close in a second. But are there any other points or questions or things that people are passionate about that they'd like to discuss or make a point? And I apologise, Duncan, for missing you out there on the Miro board. I just missed that.
I definitely see value, Paul, in bringing this together, even as just a kind of a follow up and a debrief for everyone who've been part of this. I'm sure that's a given, but just for anyone else who's unsure. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. I think there's some key themes that have come out of this, and as we said at the start, there's something about thinking about the data, the river data, all the kind of various information sources, and thinking about how we can gather more information and data, but also work differently across different partners to achieve more of a kind of catchment approach. I think some of the things that I've kind of picked up around awareness and education, certainly greater visibility of the data and having it one place. I think that's a common theme that's come up, and where that needs to be published, and also how that can kind of enable policy decisions in the future as well. So some kind of key themes that I think have been really useful, and I think what would be useful, as you say, to kind of bring all of the data together into a summary, and I guess share that with some of the key parties on the Wharfe and broader than the Wharfe as well. So what have we learned here? What could we put into practice? what could be improved, and how do we take it forwards, and I guess gather more data, but it's also about working in a different way going forwards as well.
Okay. Any other points anyone else like to join in? Okay. Well, so Richard Emmett is online, and I think, as I've said, the way we'll follow up with this on our side of the project working with Yorkshire Water is we'll be writing all of the, we'll put the Miro boards up live, we'll write a little bit of a commentary. Our team have been capturing the outputs during the day, and we'll be writing a blog post to summarise what we've done and what everyone has helped us to work out, to comment on where we are now. And now I'm just going to ask Richard to help me close and say what do we think was going to happen next?
Thanks very much, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Well, first of all, I hope everyone's enjoyed the day and found it interesting. And apologies that I've not been able to be with you for most of it. I was spending quite a lot of it out in the River Hull catchment, looking at some of the issues of what is effectively an artificially created landscape out in East Yorkshire. I'll actually pick up on Jeff Roberts' question first before I come to the what next point, which is, I guess, the most important thing for me to talk about. And Jeff rightly talks about the sort of agricultural impact on water courses. And my experience of dealing with agriculture and certainly decent sized farmers in the lowland catchments, particularly big arable farmers, is that they actually do have quite a lot of data. They've certainly got a lot of input data as to what they're putting into the soil. They have quite a lot of mapping data on the quality of their land and how it performs in terms of yields. And they're also quite interested, in my experience, in the kind of data that we share with them around the chemical content of rivers and how that corresponds to what they put in the soil. And they're quite interested in working with us on things like what happens if you increase organic matter in the soil, and how does that save them money on their farming inputs, as well as save us money in terms of water treatment and flood resilience. So I think there is data sets there, and I was with the NFU yesterday on something completely different. So I think it's important that we have a dialogue with them to see what is possible. It might be slightly different in the uplands, where you've got a different sort of agriculture, less intensive, more livestock related, but nonetheless, let's explore it. So sorry to dive into that in a little bit of detail, but it's something that I think is very interesting. In terms of what happens next more broadly, I'm very keen to kind of to look at the Google Docs, the outputs from today, and I guess there's two or three things that I'd like to see happen really. One is, I suspect there will be issues that we've only partly worked in the course of the day, which would benefit from maybe a smaller group carrying on and continuing to work those. What I'd like to do is kind of keep the conversations going on some of those specific issues that we think might be particularly promising. And if there's anything that anyone on the call in the meeting sees that they think would be worth working further, then please let us know, because it's not just about us having all the good ideas. The nature of this sort of event is that we share those collaboratively. I'd like to keep those sort of micro conversations, those specific conversations going. I also would like, as Marie suggests, to disseminate the results to stakeholders within catchments within Yorkshire and beyond, who would be interested to see what we've been talking about today. So I think that'll be a priority for us rather. And I'd also quite like to have a session with DEFRA, the Environment Agency, and potentially the regulator, to kind of set out what we think should be the aspiration of water companies and other stakeholders for open data in this area, both from two perspectives: one, to enable the public to hold us to account for how we're doing, and two, to kind of get a better understanding and a more holistic view of how catchments operate. So those would be the two or three things that I'd like to see happen next, but that's not an exclusive list, clearly. And if colleagues have got any other views of things that we could do with the information and ways in which we can keep the discussion going, then please let me know. Big thanks to everyone at ODI Leeds for making this happen today. Big thanks to my colleagues at Yorkshire Water for the work they've put in, the time they've given up to participate in today. I look forward to catching up with you all and just kind of getting under the skin of what's been discussed. And also many thanks to everyone in the wider network who's taken the trouble to stay with us for the day and help us work through what is an important issue. We'd like to keep talking to you. So thank you very much, and back to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Richard. Hopefully you can still hear me. Okay, so if you want to contribute to the Google Docs, they're still there. If you want to review, we'll be putting the Miro boards up live, and we'll be writing those up over the next week or so. As Richard said, just please stay in touch, keep the conversations going, and we'll be contacting everyone who signed up for this with a little bit more information as we go. But obviously, as Richard said, it's an important issue, and is going to become even more important over the next weeks, months, and years. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to sign off and get my second ice lolly of the day. So thank you, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.